Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to hit subscribe and give this video a like. It helps more than you might think. On July 12, 1931, a 16-year-old girl named Emily Jones was discovered by the side of the road. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found severe burns covering her body. When authorities asked Emily why she was there, she gave a cryptic response. "I heard it every night. At some point I thought I could get used to it. If only I hadn't been so selfish, none of this would have happened." We lived in a small place in the middle of town in Colorado. It wasn't much, but it was home. At least, that's what my parents always said. Every time I walked through the neighborhood, I felt the stares. People whispered just loud enough for me to hear the sharp edges of their words. My cheeks burned every time, a mix of anger and embarrassment. I hated it. Sharing a room with my younger sister Lily wasn't any easier. The room was tiny, and I longed for a space of my own, a place where I could shut the door on the world and breathe. I couldn't keep living like this. I knew my parents weren't bad people. They worked hard, and they loved us, or at least I thought they did. But sometimes it felt like they didn't really see me, like I was invisible in this house. After days of thinking it over, I decided to tell my parents how I felt. I waited until dinner one evening. My hands trembled as I spoke, carefully choosing my words. I told them about how small the room felt and how badly I wanted my own space. My mother's face barely changed as she set her fork down. "You're still just a child, Emily," she said. "You'll have plenty of time for your own space when you're older." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the coldness in her tone. It was as if my feelings didn't matter. Anger bubbled up inside me. I pushed my chair back, the screech echoing through the room, and stormed upstairs, leaving my dinner untouched. Up in my room, I sat on my bed, the silence around me deafening. What had I expected? My parents didn't care about the things that mattered to me. Maybe I was just too much. Weeks passed, and nothing changed. My frustration grew, and soon I stopped trying to be calm. I yelled, I pleaded, not caring how much it hurt them to hear it. Looking back now, I wish I'd been more understanding. I wish I hadn't been so selfish. Maybe if I'd listened, my father wouldn't have done what he did, but that was where it all began. I still remember that morning clearly. It was early in the year, and by then I had grown distant, hardly speaking to anyone. My 16th birthday was only a few months away, a perfect time to finally get my own room, the one thing I'd longed for. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to happen. Everything and everyone irritated me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever change. That morning was different, though. My mother woke me earlier than usual, asking for help in the kitchen. The air smelled of roasting chicken, fresh salads, and wine. It felt like something special. I wondered where it had all come from and why we were celebrating, but something held me back from asking. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. For once, I just wanted to enjoy the moment. As dinner was winding down, my dad cleared his throat, capturing everyone's attention. "I have some news," he began, pausing dramatically. My heart quickened. "We're moving," he said finally. Moving? My mind raced with questions. Where? Why? What did this mean for us? Dad's grin widened as he continued. "We're getting a new house, a big one with 5 bedrooms, lots of bathrooms, and even an attic." I couldn't believe it. A big house? 5 bedrooms? Finally, I would have a room of my own. No more sharing with Lily. No more feeling cramped. For the first time in months, excitement surged through me. I couldn't wait to show off our new home to the kids who used to mock ours. But the thrill was short-lived. "The new house," Dad added, "is outside of town, far from here." My excitement faltered. The thought of leaving everything I knew, even if it wasn't perfect, stung. Still, the idea of having my own room drowned out the unease. Then Lily spoke up, her voice bright with curiosity. "But why 5 rooms, Dad? There are only 4 of us." A knowing look passed between my parents. Mom smiled softly before saying, "Because soon, there will be 5. It took a moment for her words to sink in. Then Lily and I leapt from our seats, hugging her tightly as we squealed with delight. Mom was expecting. The thought of a new baby filled the room with a warmth that momentarily pushed aside all doubts. After weeks of packing and planning, we finally moved into our new home. It was an old stone house with a charming apple tree in the front yard. It was big and cozy, with creaky floorboards and thick, drafty windows. I was especially excited about my new room. It was spacious, with a large window that overlooked the garden. Once we were settled in, we started exploring. The attic was vast and dusty, a little eerie but intriguing. We decided to use it to store old toys, clothes, and books. Lily and I began to fill cardboard boxes with our belongings, board games, puzzles, and stuffed animals. As we worked, I noticed an old, tattered doll with faded, dry hair and glassy eyes. It gave me the creeps, so I tossed it into a box marked trash. After hours of unpacking and hauling furniture, our new house finally began to feel like home. The kitchen, with its worn wooden cabinets and vintage appliances, looked perfect. Mom and I spent the afternoon baking chocolate chip cookies, filling the air with a warm, sweet aroma. That evening, we gathered around the large dining table for our first meal in our new home, a hearty dinner of chili and cornbread. The spacious room felt strange, so different from our cramped old kitchen. As night fell, I felt peaceful and content. My new room was perfect, with a big window looking out onto the backyard. I couldn't wait to spend my first night alone in my own space. I slipped into my nightdress and climbed into bed. I didn't know how long I'd been asleep before I heard a creak at my bedroom door. My eyes flew open, but the room was dark. I sat up, straining to hear. Another creak, this time closer, near the bed. Heart pounding, I swung my legs over the side and crept toward the noise. Moonlight illuminated a small figure on the floor. It was Lily, fast asleep. She must have snuck into my room while I was sleeping. "Lily," I whispered, shaking her gently. "What are you doing here?" She stirred and slowly opened her eyes. "I couldn't sleep," she mumbled. "I heard a noise from the attic and I got scared." I chuckled softly. "It's probably just the wind," I reassured her. Taking her hand, I led her back to her room, deciding to stay with her for a while. Maybe if we were together, she wouldn't be so scared. We lay in silence for a few minutes, and I glanced over to see Lily's eyelids fluttering shut. Just as I was about to leave, it came, a high-pitched screech that sent a chill through my body. Lily bolted upright, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Probably just an animal," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe a rat or a bird got trapped up there." Even as I said it, I didn't believe myself. The sound was too sharp, too unsettling to be a simple animal. We both listened, but the noise didn't come again. Slowly, Lily's breathing softened, and she drifted off to sleep. I stayed awake a little longer, my ears straining for any sound, but the room remained quiet. Eventually, my exhaustion won, and I fell asleep beside her. The next morning, I overheard Lily telling Mom about the noise. As usual, Mom brushed it off, barely glancing up from her coffee. "It's probably just a rat or the floorboard settling," she said. But I wasn't convinced. Something about that sound felt wrong. I needed to find out what it was. After breakfast, I grabbed Lily's hand. "Let's check the attic together," I said. The attic was dusty and cluttered, with cobwebs clinging to every corner. Sunlight poured through one of the windows. It was open. I'd forgotten to lock it the night before. "It must have been a raccoon or something," I told Lily, pointing to the window. She sighed in relief and hurried out of the attic, satisfied with my explanation. But I wasn't done. As I scanned the room, something caught my eye. Beneath a pile of old boxes, I saw it, the tattered doll. My stomach turned. I knew I had thrown that thing away. Picking it up, I studied its faded hair and glassy eyes. It was the same doll. How could it have come back? Confused and uneasy, I went downstairs to ask Lily if she'd taken it out of the trash. She shook her head, and I believed her. Lily wouldn't have lied about something like this. I was determined to get rid of it for good. I took the doll outside and threw it in the trash bin again. That night I closed the attic window securely, certain there wouldn't be any more noises. But I was wrong. The sound started as a piercing screech that echoed through the house, followed by heavy thuds, like something being dragged across the attic floor. Fear knotted in my stomach as I swung my legs out of bed. Grabbing the oil lamp from my nightstand, I tiptoed into the hallway. It was dark and silent, except for the creaking floorboards beneath my feet. As I reached the attic stairs, I heard something above, a faint, deliberate sound. It was like footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" I whispered into the darkness. There was no response. Then another creak came, this time from the stairs themselves, above me. I froze. I hadn't even set foot on the first step. My heart pounded as I raised the oil lamp, trying to see into the shadows. That's when I heard it. Hesitant, heavy footsteps, growing louder as they descended the stairs. Panic surged through me. I stepped back too quickly, lost my footing, and fell hard onto the floor. The oil lamp shattered beside me, plunging the hallway into complete darkness. I stayed still, holding my breath, my body trembling. The sound of footsteps grew closer. Whatever was up there, it was coming for me. I'd never been so scared. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I screamed and spun around. It was my dad, his face drawn with concern. He held up a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. I rushed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He held me tight, and for a moment the world felt safer. "There's something up there. I heard its footsteps," I gasped, my words coming out in shaky breaths. Dad frowned but seemed determined. "I'm going to check it out," he said. I didn't want him to go. I knew something was up there, something huge, something wrong. But he insisted, gently telling me to stay back. I couldn't let him go alone, so I followed him up the creaky stairs, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the gloom ahead of us. With each step, my heart pounded harder. When we reached the attic, there was nothing there. The windows were still closed, and the eerie silence filled the room. We had no explanation for what we had heard, so my dad said that it was probably just an old house settling. But I knew it wasn't just that. Something was wrong, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out what it was. For a few days, everything was quiet. No more unexplained noises, no more eerie occurrences. I could finally sleep peacefully, free from the fear that had haunted me. Then, one afternoon, while sitting at my desk, I heard Lily's voice from outside. I peered out the window and saw her standing beneath the apple tree, holding a red apple. She was talking to someone, but the yard was empty. My stomach twisted. I slipped out of my room, creeping toward her. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, but Lily didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see, a vacant stare that sent a chill through me. I tried again, but she remained oblivious to my presence, as though lost in a world of her own. That evening during dinner, Mom seemed unwell. She barely touched her food, her face pale, and she complained of nausea. Lily, in her usual quiet way, offered Mom the apple she'd been holding. Mom accepted it without question. The next morning, I woke to a scream from my mother's room. My heart skipped a beat and I rushed to her side. She was lying in bed, tears streaming down her face. Dad stood by the window, his face ashen. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. Neither of them answered. I looked at Mom, and then it hit me. She had lost the baby. One day, we spent an entire day organizing the attic, stacking boxes neatly, arranging old toys on shelves, and even hanging vintage clothes. It looked perfect, and I felt proud of the work we had done. But when I stepped into the attic the next morning, my jaw dropped. The room was a disaster. Boxes were scattered everywhere, toys lay haphazardly across the floor, and the clothes were in a tangled mess. I had no idea how it had happened. Lily and I set to work putting everything back in place, but when we returned the next day, the chaos had returned. Over the following days, we started to notice more strange things. Books were shifted to different shelves, toys moved from one corner to another, and occasionally, we heard faint whispers, as though someone were speaking softly in the distance. One evening, as I sat reading in my room, I heard a soft tapping sound coming from the attic. It was rhythmic, like someone knocking on a window. I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding with each step. The attic was dark and still, but the tapping continued. I strained my ears, trying to determine where the sound was coming from. Then, a cold draft swept through the room, making loose papers flutter. My skin prickled with goosebumps. I heard it again, a faint whisper that seemed to come from the shadows. A wave of panic hit me. I turned to run, but as I spun around, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the corner of my eye. A dark figure, almost invisible, seemed to dissolve into the air. I bolted from the attic. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. It didn't feel like home anymore. A few days later, as I walked past Lily's room, I heard her talking softly. I paused, listening carefully. She was speaking in hushed tones, as if trying to keep a secret. "You're mad at us?" she asked. "We didn't mean to disturb you. Please don't be angry." Curious, I knocked lightly and peeked inside. Lily sat on her bed, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, staring as though someone were there with her. "Who are you talking to, Lily?" I asked. She turned slowly, her expression distant. "My friend," she whispered. "He's angry at us. We shouldn't have gone into the attic." I felt a chill creep up my spine. Lily didn't have imaginary friends. I tried to comfort her, but her fear was palpable. Later, I told Mom and Dad about what I'd seen and heard. They listened, but they dismissed it as a child's imagination. I wanted to believe that, but something told me there was more to it than that. The next morning, we couldn't find Lily anywhere. We searched the house, the yard, and even around the property, but there was no sign of her. In our panic, we thought she might be hiding somewhere inside or had gotten lost nearby. We checked every room, every corner. The attic, though, was the very last place I wanted to go. It had always been the source of so many unsettling things, and I'd avoided it for as long as I could. But with no sign of her anywhere else, I had no choice. Taking a deep breath, I went up there with my parents, dread weighing on every step. When we opened the door, there she was, curled up on the cold floor, a small knife lying beside her. Her palm was bleeding. Mom rushed to her side. Lily looked up at her and said, "My friend told me to do it, just like he told me to give you the apple." We were all shocked. Lily had nearly hurt herself. It was as if something evil had taken control of her mind. To protect her, Mom and Dad decided to lock her door at night, but little did they know that was the worst decision they could have made. Locking Lily away only made whatever she had been speaking to even angrier. Unsettling things began to happen throughout the house. Objects moved on their own, crashing against walls. Terrified, Dad suggested we leave. But as if the house had heard us, the door refused to open. My dad left us by the door and rushed back inside to find a tool. Then, we started to smell smoke, like something was burning. Somehow, the stove had caught fire, and soon the kitchen was engulfed in flames. The fire spread quickly, reaching the stairs. My dad couldn't pass, and we couldn't leave. I grabbed a table mat and ran through the fire, despite Dad telling me not to. But I didn't listen. I managed to create a path for him, though we both suffered some burns in the process. Dad tried to break down the door, but it wouldn't budge. The fire kept creeping closer, and we were terrified. I closed my eyes, but luckily, Dad's strength finally broke the door open. We thought it was over. We ran out of the house and found a nearby cabin. It was already late, and we couldn't go into town, so we stayed there for the night. By midnight, we heard footsteps around the cabin. I thought we were safe, but the noises kept us on edge. Eventually, we fell asleep, huddled together on the cold, hard floor. But when I woke up, I was in the woods. I had no idea how I'd gotten there. Panic set in, and I rushed back to the cabin, but the doors wouldn't open. I knew my family was in trouble. Just as I tried to open the door, I heard footsteps behind me. I couldn't see who it was, but I was suddenly attacked. I managed to break free and ran. I ran through the woods all night, exhausted and terrified. When I finally found my way out, I collapsed. After Emily finished telling her story, she anxiously asked about her family. By the third day, her restlessness grew unbearable, her mind racing with dread. Unable to wait any longer, she bolted from the hospital, her heart pounding as she ran through the streets. The police followed her trail, catching up only when she reached the cabin, locked and silent for so long. Together, they pried the door open and found her family inside, unconscious, pale, and barely breathing. In that moment, Emily thought she had lost them all. Against all odds, her family was rushed to the hospital just in time. They survived, though shaken to the core, their memories fragmented and unclear. When the police returned to the property, all they found were ashes, the charred remains of what had once been. As Emily and her family settled into a new home across town, a faint unease lingered in the air, like a whisper of the past refusing to fade completely. You've made it, for now. Thank you for joining on this horrifying journey. If you want more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and to follow on other platforms. There are many more stories to come, and if you enjoyed this, please like the video. It really helps. Let me know your favorite part or any suggestions in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, if you can.